When it comes to self-development, no matter the method you use, the vital point is to practice. If you are ready to learn methods to transform your life, actively grow into the potential you know is inside of you, then you're in the right place. Welcome to the Vital Point podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Schechter. I'm a psychedelic integration and transformation coach, breathwork facilitator, and an enthusiast of personal growth. You have the capacity to evolve and bring your intentions and dreams into the world, and there's never been more access to so many incredible modalities that can help you on your journey. This podcast will help you learn about new methods to bring into your life, give you practices to follow, and share stories from practitioners who are doing the work so that you can feel inspired to go and practice, because that's the vital point. If you're enjoying the podcast, I'd really appreciate you leaving a review, subscribe if you're watching it on YouTube, or whatever platform you're listening to right now. It's still a new podcast, and I'm committed to growing so that more people can learn and have access to these incredible practices and feel inspired to go and try something that will literally change their lives. So your help is really appreciated. I thank you for supporting the show. And my guest on this episode is Dr. Saad Al-Olimat. He's a Pharm PhD who is the CEO and founder of Psilohealth, which provides education, supports legislation, and facilitates integration of psilocybin-supported care. Dr. Saad wears many hats in addition to his role at Psilohealth and as a community pharmacy manager and mental health advocate. He's also the vice president of the Psychedelic Club of Pittsburgh and the co-founder of the Psychedelic Pharmacists Association. And Psilohealth is a really incredible organization. I have the honor of helping to host integration workshops with them. And Psilohealth has also recently launched their Psilocybin Peer Supporter program, an accessible course designed for anyone seeking to learn about psilocybin and how to support their peers and community members in the responsible and safe use of psilocybin under a risk reduction framework. This fills a much needed role in a community-based ecosystem alongside trained clinicians and healers to support those looking to heal with psilocybin.
All right, Saad, welcome to the Vital Point.
Hey, nice to be here.
It's a nice early morning here. Happy to have you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jonathan.
Yeah, last time we were together was in Florida.
Yeah, Tampa.
Yeah. That was my first time in Florida, and had a really nice time. You know, you picked out a great spot for the Psilohealth wellness approachment. And how did you guys land on calling it that as opposed to a retreat? Because I really like that. I felt like it gave it a different energy. You know?
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. So it really is about the intentionality of the words we select. So to emphasize the word retreat is really sort of supporting this concept of withdrawing or maybe disconnecting. And of course, not all retreats are like that by any means. I know many retreat facilitators, retreat owners that have deeply impactful, connected experiences with their guests. But for us, it's about being intentional with the words. So we chose approachment, so that way it really emphasizes the idea of connecting, the idea of, not to withdraw, but to dive in and connect with the self, with the other, and also the environment.
Yeah, I like that. It's something similar to I talk about this a lot too. I've noticed it within sort of this psychedelic sphere or coaching integration. The words that we use, oftentimes people have these really incredible transpersonal experiences, and then the way that they're describing it when they're talking, when they're in integration, is that was crazy. Mm-hmm. Or you'll never believe what happened. And it's well, why are you sort of framing it like that? Why is it crazy? And right. It's once I started to notice that, I noticed it not only in myself, but in other people, and just, well, why are we talking ourselves out of the magic that's all around us? Right. So I try to be really cognizant of that. And it's definitely something I catch myself saying oh, that was really crazy sometimes. Yeah. And then I just try to stop myself, So I appreciate that. Yeah. So for, for the listeners, Saad and his organization Psilohealth invited me as one of the facilitators to come to this wellness approachment. That was in April. It's
Yeah.
it's hard to believe, like, so much time has flown by
Mhm.
since then.
Yeah.
And we had a really incredible time in terms of doing this dry run for what, further down the road, is you guys are planning on expanding it, right?
Yeah.
And
Totally.
having some medicine work, as well. But the different activities were really impactful and really powerful. And one of the things that I really appreciated about it was how much time was spent on the preparation before we actually got there, so that it wasn't like, hey, we're meeting these people sort of for the first time that we're gonna, like, be really vulnerable with and really share and really open up and bond with. um yeah, like, it felt like I already knew people and we were already connected. So I
Yeah.
felt like there was a lot of good preparation done on that, which, again, like, is something that I think certain people, like, neglect, like how
Mhm.
much of the integration process actually starts with preparation and
Yeah.
actually starts with that set and setting and really getting to know yourself and what you're getting into, rather than like, well, I had this experience and now I have to figure out what to do with it, you
Right.
know? Yeah.
Well, and the last thing we wanted too was for people to show up, from traveling all around the country, and then start doing, the icebreakers and start doing the introductions. Like, why not? And it was kind of like following the clinical trial approach to, dose day support being the extensive preparation process, which includes defining the dose day logistics and building rapport with the people that you're going to be with. And when it comes to a group of 12 people or so, we should definitely have some extensive preparation, I believe, just so that way people can have a good idea as to what type of energy will be in the room throughout the entire weekend. So I appreciate that you appreciated the preparation process.
Yeah, like, I feel like it's something that I'm continuing to learn, and I felt like that weekend was a big learning experience for me. Um like, the way that, I started working with psychedelics, but there was nobody talked about preparation. Nobody talked about set and setting.
Mm,
The word clinical was not a part of my, like, syntax or vocabulary at all. It was just like you're learning things based on the people around you that may or may not have good information or good experiences themselves.
mm,
So I found myself oftentimes during the weekend, because, just for the background, like, there were doctors there, and there
mm,
were people that were very educated, like yourself, about the pharmacology and the different, like, the biology and the chemistry, and so it was like, wow, like, I often found myself just kind of sitting and soaking it in,
mm.
and, like, feeling a little bit like a fish out of water in terms of, like, the educational component of it, or like the background. But it was also very fascinating of, like, look at look at this big world that's out there. Like, there's people that have different experiences and different motivations or different intentions and different things that have brought them to this same shared space.
Yeah,
And, like, I found that was a very cool thing to just kind of be a part in. Like, I felt like a fish in like the pond got a little bit bigger, and it was like, oh, cool. Like, I get to interact and meet people that have a totally different background and that I can learn things from.
yeah,
And that felt really cool.
totally. Yeah, we're all in the same pond. It's just like, swimming around to meet the other fish, right? So yeah, it was an
Yeah.
awesome time, and it was cool because I knew everyone there personally on different levels of experience. So I have like work colleagues, like my day job, but then I also have my psychedelic work colleagues, people on the Psilohealth team, close collaborators, and being able to bring everyone together. I mean, I'm so grateful for the experience. It reminds me of like you know how like on Disney Channel they had like, the Sweet Life of Zack and Cody and Hannah Montana, and I forget the other show, but they had that one episode or movie where they brought all of them together. And it was like the Sweet Life on deck with all the different characters. It's like whoa, like combination of all these people that were siloed off, you know, in these unique relationships, these unique stories, these unique ponds. And now
Right.
here we are in this one big pond with all these fish that we know from different levels of life. So it was, that experience was a wonderful one, and I'm excited for the next approachment we decide to plan. Hmm.
Yeah, definitely. So how did you get started kind of on this path? You know, how that led to Psilohealth? Because I'm assuming that was the sequence.
Yeah, totally, totally. So I had my first psychedelic experience when I was a junior in college. So it was my first year of pharmacy school. That's kind of how it works with our program. And I was, you know, I didn't practice any self care. I was not really focused on developing a healthy relationship with myself, my family, my community. And I purely pursued the experience out of recreational, you know, experience for recreational experience. I thought,
Mhm.
okay, I got to see, you know, cool imagery or colors. Like, oh, this is gonna be fun, right? And we ended up, my friend, he surprised me with a bag of mushrooms that day, and he said, hey, like I have a surprise for us. I'm like, oh, okay, like let's do it. So we went to his girlfriend's house, who I didn't really know, with her roommate, who I didn't really know, and then and again in the house I've never been in. Um, so I was with them. We took right under 3 grams each, and I'm context. I'm like really allergic to cats, and there were cats there. It was like a fully carpeted home, and I was already struggling to breathe. Like, oh, okay, this will be fine, and it was really not fine. Like once the experience kicked in, I was tunnel visioning in and out of reality. It was honestly a horrible experience. I thought I was dying and I had to get out of there. I couldn't breathe. I was going inside and outside just trying to catch my breath. It was a really, you know, horrible situation for me. And I then texted my really great friend. I was like, "Hey, can you please come pick me up and take me back to your house?" And he did that. Very grateful because that setting was completely different. You know, his home is, you know, I was there a lot of my teenage life of growing up in my hometown. So the setting was much more familiar, much more comfortable. And that's where the flood of insights really started coming in. And then the next day I just remember, you know, thinking about it and I'm like, wow, like, you know, a lot of this stuff that I was bearing underneath me came up and I faced it.
Mhm.
And the way I explained the experience to people at the time was it felt as though my entire life I was wearing sunglasses and I finally took them off for the first time. To where like
Mhm.
nothing's different, but everything's a little different. And I felt a sense of clarity for the first time. A lot of other insights came up, but essentially I became very curious about this experience. This was right, you know, around 5.5 years ago or so now. And that a year from then, I was just reading about it. I was reading up about Terence McKenna. I came across the stoic ape theory. That was deeply fascinating to me. So I just followed my curiosity, stumbled upon Maps, the Zendo project, you know, joined some newsletters, subscribed to some stuff, read a lot of my own time. And it was my second year of pharmacy school where I diagnosed myself with depression, major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder. I was really struggling mentally, emotionally, spiritually. I was very disconnected at the time with my friend group and my family. And I decided to, you know, rather than going the traditional and antidepressant route, I decided to source mushrooms, and I, you know, consumed 5 grams after extensive preparation because now I knew what preparation was. Now I knew set and setting. Now I knew what the heck integration was loosely at the time. So
Right.
I did a lot of preparation work, which was just mindful journaling, intention setting, a lot of education, and I had the experience and it was completely liberating. It changed my life forever. And you know, I just remember the imagery of feeling as though my entire life had been like a caterpillar. And actually shared a bit about this at the wellness approachment when we were doing our journaling session with Ian. Um, and I felt I was like a caterpillar, just trying not to be stepped on, always my head down, just like not really, just getting by. And here I am now under my blankets, all rolled up in like this cocoon, and I'm like really just like reflecting and processing. And I just remember just this surge of energy to where I like just got out of the cocoon, and I stuck my hand out through the blankets, and I just felt so like free, like I can breathe, like oh my gosh, like wow. And I'll never forget that feeling of just freedom. And it was everything I needed at the time, as a younger adult. And what happened from there was a sequence of events where essentially I would talk to my friends about this, and they would get closed off. It's still very stigmatized, and many, even today, it's still very stigmatized. I had no one to talk to about this. This is about 4.5 years ago or so now. So I just integrated it on my own way, and I joined a lot of professional organizations on campus, some community organizations. I was elected as the youngest board member of the Southside Community Council, the borough I lived in, and the Pittsburgh community. I was the president of the Pediatric Pharmacy Advocacy Group. I was the vice president of the Pennsylvania Pharmacists Association, treasurer of Phi Delta Chi, and I wanted to share that I was the international vice president of the American Pharmacists Association. So I did all that in 1 year while juggling, 2 part-time jobs and being a full-time student. And I loved it. I absolutely freaking loved it. And I felt more meaning because I remember from the experience, it's like, if I died, like what have I done? Like what have I actually accomplished? Who have I impacted? Like what do I have to say for myself? And that was just like a wow, like, I don't need to do this for glory. I'm not doing it for glory. I'm not doing it for recognition. I'm doing it because like the value of service and being connected for a greater purpose, like there's something so raw about it. And that's what I did for a year. And it was a year after that second experience. So this was a year after that 5 gram mushroom experience. I flew out to Seattle to represent the American Pharmacists Association, our Duquesne chapter. And I was there from Thursday to Sunday. And on Sunday, it was like the closing ceremony. So I asked my advisor, hey, do you care if I go explore downtown Seattle? She's like, oh yeah, go do your thing. So, and mind you, again, I've had no community. I've had no one to talk to about my experiences. I was just doing it myself, and I was learning and growing, and I was very passionate about it. But I would be laughed in I would talk to my friends about this, and they'll laugh at my face, saying, "Oh, you think mushrooms are going to be able to help cure or alleviate symptoms of depression?" Like they would laugh at me, and I'm like, "Yeah, I do think that."
Right.
So I was wandering around downtown Seattle, and I go to like a gourmet dumpling spot, and just exploring. And for lunch, I end up at a wood stove bagel coffee shop. And okay, I've never had a wood stove bagel before. Let's give it a shot. So I get my bagel and my coffee. I sit down on my laptop, and it's dead. So then I look way across the room. There's this one table by itself with an outlet. So I go there, plug my laptop in, and I'm sitting down. And then right to my left is a group of about maybe 10 to 12 people with name tags on that say, "Hi, my name is so and so." And in the middle of the table, it says SPS. So I'm like they're like energetic, they're friendly. I can I feel their presence, and we're right beside each other. So I'm getting work done, and then as I'm getting my work done, that's when they start talking about like Timothy Leary and ayahuasca, psilocybin, DMT, and I'm like, whoa, like what's going on? And they say, oh, we're the Seattle Psychedelic Society. We meet up at a random coffee shop on Sundays. Would you care to join us for conversation? And like here I am, like in awe. Like, yes, of course. And I, close my laptop and I scoot on in, and I was there for maybe 2.5 hours just talking with complete strangers about psychedelics. And you look at that table and you have old people, young people, people of color, white folk, and here we are bonding and connecting about like the mystical experience and the philosophical underpinnings of what psychedelics are and the ethical considerations it has in our clinical frameworks. And I found community all across the country. So from that experience, I came back to Pittsburgh the very next that night, and then that next day on Monday, I created the Pittsburgh Psychedelic Society as a meetup group. That's what they recommended me to do. So then I did that, and people started coming to the random coffee shop on Sundays that we would host. We would host meetups, and that introduced me to sitting with folks. I would never source; I would just sit, and I did the preparation work with people, the sitting, the integration, just following up. I had a lot of metrics established for it, just to see how they do before and after the experience, to see if there's any actual changes. And it was really cool just to do my own research. Um, I started doing that with Isaiah, who Isaiah Noriega. We started just like he was really helping on like the providing some insight about what we should be doing, and him and I decided to co-found Psilohealth because we needed to step away from this kind of gray area and be more in the education, legislation, integration front, so that way we can be very public facing. Just because with my doctorate degree pending, my licensure, coming up soon, I recognize that there's a lot that I don't know. I didn't know how to navigate it, 3 or 4 years ago. So establishing Psilohealth was really for us a need to do, because I couldn't keep doing the gray work. So we are focused on the education, legislation, and integration of what we call psilocybin-supported care. So we're very, very focused on calling it psilocybin-supported care versus psilocybin-assisted therapies, because if you call it a therapy, it always means that it's clinical and technically it has to be an FDA indication. So being able to ensure that this is, homegrown, that this is through the community, led by the community, we want, and also not to have to say, oh, you have a disease, let's treat the disease. Let's go ahead and just call it care, right? So psilocybin supported care versus psilocybin assisted therapy. And that's how we got into it. That's how I got into it. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing right now.
That's amazing. I didn't know that you were doing that sort of sitting and supporting work in that way. And that's something that I'm curious about in terms of like people that are doing their own work. I actually had a client just the other day. We were talking about it. She was asking me like, well, how do I tell if my microdosing is working? And I said, well, I think it's pretty easy. Like there's two different components to this, right? Like there's things that you can measure in a very black and white way. Like if you're creating, like we talked about creating like a daily routine, a morning program with meditation, with journaling, with gratitude practice, and she wanted to improve her sleep. So I'm like, okay, these are very measurable things, right? Like you can check it off every day. Did I meditate this morning? Did I do my gratitude practice? Did I do my journaling? Did I get to bed by 8 o'clock or whatever time it is? And then there's these other things where it's like, it's not quite as black and white as that, but you can still measure it every day, on a scale of 1 to 5. How anxious did I feel today? Right. How happy did I feel? How did I feel while I was doing these things? And then just tracking it over time of like, you start to see the patterns, you start to see the shifts. And then we can also go back and say, okay, well, we're not getting the results that we want here. So what else can we do? What can we tweak? So I'm curious if you have anything to add to that, or like sort of like best practices that you found doing that work, to that process. Cause I think that people are sort of trying to figure these things out on their own a little bit. Right.
Yeah. I mean, just because you can measure it doesn't mean it's the only source of value. Right. It's also just like that sense of that feeling you have as you reflect on your own personal development. It's not like looking at the other and saying, oh, they're doing X, Y, Z, they're checking the boxes, like I need to be doing that. It's about like how comfortable am I in my own skin? But also it comes down to the person's intentions. You can't really say like one person in their experience with microdosing or with higher dose day experiences, or their integration practice. The way one person practices it and finds success in it is completely different than the other. It's a very personalized approach to the individual. So for me, like I think that self-forgiveness is a big sticking point. So it's like, okay, maybe I didn't check those boxes, but how do I feel about myself in the sense that I did not? Like, am I optimistic in knowing that tomorrow's a new day? Today was busy. I understand that. I'm not going to beat myself up. Let's go ahead and get back into it again tomorrow. Or am I going to be like, oh my God, I didn't do it, I'm falling off the path, like that, like, and then go into these negative thought loops, negative thought patterns. You know,
Yeah.
what's the healthier, or what's the, I don't want to say healthier, but what's like maybe just like the better, you know, the better mindset there, right? The more forgiving mindset. And again, it comes down to the individual. But at the end of the day, both those people didn't check the box. So, you know, just because they didn't check the box, right? Like, I guess you could also make another box saying, "Oh, I forgave myself for not checking the box."
Yeah.
But yeah, it's. I think it's very unique to the person and their own goals and their intentions and their practice.
Yeah, I guess what I mean is
Hmm.
like for myself, I feel like I stumbled into a lot of those things that you're talking about. Like
Okay.
it's like we sort of like looked up one day and realized like, whoa, wait, there's all these things that have changed, and like
Hmm.
I feel different. I feel more forgiving towards myself. I love myself more. I have more awareness around these different areas. And then after that, it was like, okay, well, how can I start to track this? How can I start
Hmm.
um, to help myself, and also like how can I help somebody else so that they're not going through the same sort of pitfalls that I went through, or like
Hmm.
how can I take my experience and then like shorten somebody else's experience a little bit, like help them get to the same place quicker, or
Yeah.
give them the resources that I wish I had when I was starting out. Give them
Right.
that knowledge of like, oh, here's things you can do. Like I didn't know that stuff, when I was starting out.
Right.
Um, and like I know we like for the wellness approachment, we had some tools that we use like that as well, like in terms of like surveying like where your mental state was at, like um and how happy do I feel on a regular basis, am I taking care of myself in these different ways, and then being able to measure that or retake that assessment like a month after the approachment, like, oh, what has changed. So I think like I feel like those having those tools is something that can be really helpful, and
Hmm.
make it more intentional rather than just sort of stumbling along trying to figure out the best way on your own, which it sounds like both of us sort of
Totally.
have done in our own ways, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think just having a support group goes a
Mm,
long way. You know, if you can find friends, whether they be in person or online or whatever community you're part of, and finding those people that want to support you in those goals. But you have to also be very, you have to be willing to share those goals and be open to that constructive
mm,
criticism. So it's really just, yeah, as Terrence McKenna said, find the others,
right.
right? So I think it's really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
But then, of course, there's those very, those routines, those habits you try and practice on a day to day
Hmm.
basis.
Another thing that like stuck out to me in your story is that insight or that experience of you the way that you put it was like coming out of the cocoon, or like coming out of the caterpillar stage into this new stage. And like it sounds like that experience had a pretty large impact on you. um
Mm.
that so how has that experience like continued to unfold, and are there any things that you do to either remember it or to like encourage it, or to continue to like to dive into it, to explore it more?
Yeah, I think that one thing that's been cool is if I ever find myself maybe just like with like some negative thought loops, whether it be at work or just going about some different activities, just because there's a lot going on with the pharmacy world, the psychedelic world, my own personal life, and I'll see, I'll see a butterfly just flapping its wings randomly, and it kind of just grounds me instantly. Or I'll see someone walking by with a butterfly tattoo on their shoulder, and I'm like, it just instant grounding, and it reminds me of the experience to just to like let go and surrender to an
Mm,
extent. Like you can't control everything, and I think that's one thing that I'm balancing is controlling what I can control, and then everything else just trusting in that. So the being able to see those symbols on a day to day. Thank goodness a lot of people have butterfly tattoos. So that's been nice. But then it's it's in terms of like how else I've integrated that. It's just really being mindful, like being thoughtful, being present as often as I can. I mean, the experience, I think there's a lot you can learn from every experience, but then also I'm still integrating experiences from several years
Right.
back. I'm still processing things from a long time ago, and that's where the beauty of having that community support comes in, to where I can share about the experience, and then one person will ask a question, and then it's an explosion of thoughts. Like, oh my gosh, I never thought of it
Mm.
that way. For example, I shared with my good friend Bill that in that same experience, I had like a pixie, like fairy creature, tell me to save the butterflies. And then I'm like, what the heck? Like, save the butterflies? How am I supposed to do that? And I wasn't sure how to process that at all. And you know, 3 years, 4 years later, I met my current partner, and she dropped me off to or she picked me up from a Pittsburgh Psychedelic Society meetup, and Bill was there, and Bill was aware of this experience because I've integrated with him. And I said, "Oh, Bill, come meet my partner Marielle." And on her finger was a butterfly that day, with a ripped off wing, and his name was Mo because her father ran over the butterfly while mowing the lawn, and she, being who she is, saved that butterfly.
Mm.
And Bill was like, "Son, that's like your experience to save the butterfly." And I'm like, like, oh my gosh, like what the heck? And who knows what that is, right? We can't quantify it. There's no science there. This could be, we're maybe taking leaps and bounds. But for me, it's there's like so much meaning there, because rather than just understanding that there's meaning, it's feeling that sense of meaning that you get from the experience itself. And that's just like one example about the value of integration, but also just the beauty of what happens out to your perspective, perhaps post experience, depending on how you process these things.
Yeah, it sounds like the community aspect is really important to you because people are sharing in that meaning that you are finding, in that value, that richness that you have discovered within your own experiences. And then they can like support
100%.
and like celebrate and give you additional perspective, or reminders like, hey, see that butterfly tattoo? Or, oh, look at that. Like, look at how those things interrelate to each other. And
Yeah.
that's
And this,
that's super
oh,
beautiful.
sorry.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing about like within Buddhism, it's like emptiness is like that nothing has a meaning or an identity of it in and of itself. Everything has identity and meaning based on what we assign to it, and that's
Right.
completely valid, right? And that's why like one person can see like some sort of guru, and the other person sees like an old man, just like
Hmm.
so that's
Yeah.
wonderful that like people, that you have people around you that can share in that vision and in that meaning that's been so important to you, so impactful.
Yeah. And just being a part of the integration process for other people and supporting that. I mean, you're an integration specialist with Psilohealth as well, and I've also led integration workshops, integration circles, and hearing people speak about their insights, their experience. I mean, I don't know about you, but for me, I feel like it lets me learn more about myself
Hmm.
as well as I support other
Yeah.
people. Like just like, just like the additional perspective and the conclusions there, and like maybe just again that the way it's able to bring you back to the experience
Hmm.
almost. I think it's wonderful. But then, as you mentioned too, it's like we have that that shared this is shared experience where we can help make meaning of it together. And one analogy that kind of came to my mind as you're talking about that, it's kind of like the Marvel universe. I don't know if you're big into
Oh
the
yeah.
Marvel movies, the superhero movies, but it's like you can watch the movie by yourself or with others, and you have this experience. Your unique perspective on that movie. But then someone else will be like, "Oh, like did you see like that cameo of Stan Lee?" Or, "Oh, did you see who's Stan Lee?" And like, bam, there's a whole bunch of stuff there. I say, "Oh, like did you see like that Star Wars figure because of the?" And then you can talk about like some of the background of Marvel and Disney, right? And so like, there's like so much that that shared perspective and community has to offer to the value of the experience that you're experiencing, and it's enriching and it's sustainable too. You know, it's one thing to go and if you want to watch the movie over and over and over again, right? You're going to be spending a lot of money on renting that movie out, or going to the movie theater. But if you're able to do a monthly, oh, let's talk about Spider-Man, the newest Spider-Man together, and you can just talk about it and relive it through the words of others and perspectives of others, not only will you be able to tap into that experience of the movie, but you're also going to be able to get so much more insight from others' perspectives of the movie and challenge them and build on them. So I think that's one of the more sustainable approaches is that community based integration.
Yeah, there's definitely something in community. And one of the things that came up for me as you were talking was like with like within trauma work, there's like a saying of like, we don't heal in isolation. Like you heal by being witnessed, by sometimes like the other party isn't doing anything other than seeing you, that you're able to like have this completion, with somebody there, like seeing you and being accepting of it, just holding the space. So there's something magic in that community aspect of just being seen, of being heard. And like like you were saying in terms of your experience, and I've heard this from a lot of people, of like that frustration of not having anybody to share their experience with. Like that I think that can feel really suffocating to people, especially like when it's something pretty major that they're trying to unpack and like process and digest, and like, not being able to share that with the people that they have intimacy with or that they feel really close to. And all of a sudden, like you said, like here's somebody that 5 minutes ago was a stranger, and yet you're able to like connect to them in such a strong way, and like, oh yes, you get it, like I can talk about this with you, like this is so good, like this is what I've been looking for, so there's something that's magical, about that in the community that we are a part of right now, right? Which is, like you said, there's definitely some gray, and sometimes we're sort of skirting the line of certain things. And it came up for me yesterday. I was talking to somebody about, like, they were like, hey, like, do you want to come on my podcast? And then they said, well, how do we talk about the legality of this? And I said, well, that's up to you. Like we can certainly talk about it being for education and, safety and harm reduction. We could also talk about like how it's changing. Like there's, like we're in this very transitional place right now where like we're going from the black to the white, and stopping in various shades of gray. And then there's other places where it's like, no, we just don't have to worry about that anymore. And that's a really amazing thing. And I'm curious about like your take with that in terms of, Psilohealth being involved in legislation and, in education. Like where do you see sort of the psychedelic movement going and like the direction that we're headed in?
Totally. Yeah. So there's like the what's realistic, and then there's what's hopeful, right? So what's realistic is that this is going to be clinically approved by the FDA. MDMA first, and then psilocybin, and then potentially others. So MDMA for treatment for post-traumatic stress disorder, psilocybin for treatment-resistant depression, major depressive disorder, and eventually generalized anxiety disorder, and a whole bunch of other things. The beauty behind psychedelics is that they're transdiagnostic agents, so they span across different diagnoses. So we're seeing that the FDA has already granted breakthrough designation status for those two compounds, and there's a lot of research coming out for all these different indications as well as these other psychedelic compounds. So there's no question, in my opinion, that the FDA will approve these compounds, and these will become legally accessible through a like REMS program, which is a risk evaluation mitigation strategy. It's a very controlled approach to ensuring that patients get the medicine appropriately through the standards of the manufacturer that did all of the R&D for that medicine. So that includes a lot of the follow up, which is going to be technically the integration aspect of it, is seeing how the side effects are, how people are processing, just to get more data for the industry. So that's going to happen. Like, in my opinion, there's really no question about it. Like, that's going to happen. It's just how will it happen? Who will be the facilitators? Who are going to be? How will this be accessible? What type of dosage formulations will these come in? Is it going to be only tablets? Will they be inhalations? Will they be injections? There's a lot of different questions there. But at the end of the day, FDA approval route is, I believe, almost guaranteed. But what I'm hopeful for is the community-centered healing approach. So, and I guess I can touch upon Oregon real quick. Oregon is kind of like that in between, to where they're going to be legalizing it throughout the state as psilocybin services, right? They also don't call it psilocybin therapy, though they are following a very therapeutic approach. The state will be, licensing facilitators, retreat centers, or like you say, clinic centers. And there's a lot of different regulations they're carving out right now. So that way by 2023, people can, legally consume psilocybin in a safe and supportive setting in Oregon, and they will not be penalized by the law there, which is great. Although it is still going to be technically illegal federally. So it's a weird thing there. For me, it's about keeping it in the zip code. How can we make sure that these are as community driven and community led and as possible? Because yes, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing the work that's done in Oregon. It's especially wonderful for Oregonians. But for the other 49 states and other folks around the world who are struggling, do we really expect them to travel, all the way, whether it be across the country, across the world, to legally consume psilocybin and then have a couple of days of integration and maybe a phone call a month later, or a text message a month later, while they go back to their own, country, their own state, and kind of potentially fall into the same negative patterns if they don't have community? Again, earlier in this call, we stressed the importance of community in terms of the sustainability and just the benefits that community processing has to offer. So how can we keep this in the community legally? And that's what I think some awesome decriminalize nature efforts are doing. So that's a very touchy subject, some of the work they're doing and how they approach it. But at the end of the day, if you're able to decriminalize the possession, ingestion, and cultivation of entheogens, I think that's a win for the movement. But that's, again, a very touchy subject when it comes to, psychedelic exceptionalism and just like some of the politics that the decrim nature leaders have sort of followed. So with that said, what we're trying to create with Psilohealth is a community care system framework. And these frameworks are to be adopted by any community that wants to do it. And I would love to be able to see peer supporters, so specifically registered psilocybin peer supporters, working in tandem to community care clinicians to help well around the approach for the peer from preparation to integration. So if we're able to keep it in the zip code, that prevents this idea of having to do this like tourist retreat experience over in Oregon, or maybe down in somewhere in South America or Jamaica, or Central America. So being able to do it in the zip code, I think, is really what the ideal situation is like. But the question is, how do we get there?
So I think that's a good segue into talking about the Psilohealth psilocybin peer support program. So can you just give us an overview of that program?
Yeah, totally. So, I realize, so being in the community for quite some time now here in Pittsburgh, I came across a lot of misinformation, a lot of maybe potentially unwise decision making or recommendations. So the role of the peer supporter is to help counter the spread of misinformation as psychedelics become more mainstream. But then on top of that is for educational and risk reduction purposes as well. So in terms of educating, like being able to provide information for the community about what dosing looks like, what are the side effects of the psilocybin experience, what does the arc of the experience look like from start to finish generally, be able to understand the philosophical approach to harm reduction, the archetypes of harm reduction, how to attend to your peer. These are all things that I believe that anyone and everyone can learn and that everyone and anyone should be able to understand when it comes to having these conversations about psychedelics. And the role of the peer supporter is tapped into this idea of healer inclusivity. To us, healer inclusivity means that anyone and everyone should have the right and knowledge to support someone's dose day, period. If we keep it only in the world of clinicians, yes, it's going to be extremely safe, and that's what we need, but it's also going to be relatively inaccessible and relatively unaffordable. And again, like we are already seeing this bottleneck approach to how many clinicians actually know what psychedelics are even about. So how are we to expect that people are going to find that access to safety through clinicians, especially if we're trying to keep it in the zip code? So the role of the peer supporter is to sort of undercut that bottleneck approach, and by empowering everyone to understand the safety considerations, the how to support someone hands on during the experience if necessary, and how to recommend healthy integration practices. So the peer supporter role, we are creating this program. It's going to be launched on September 20th, which is Global Magic Mushrooms Day, and we want all of the information to be completely free to access. Period. Right? We can't be like, oh, it's about access and affordability, and then say, all right, it's going to be $800, to access this program. Like, no, like we're not reinventing the wheel. We're just taking a lot of other information, a lot of other experience, perspective, and consolidating it. And yes, that's a lot of time and energy. And because of that, we are going to be charging for a certificate of completion. That certificate of completion is going to be a prerequisite to apply to become a registered peer supporter, because a registered peer supporter will eventually be vetted, will have like a lot of live and synchronous training, and be able to be accessible online via database, so that way we can help people find their local support for peer support purposes.
Yeah, it's a great program, and I've been fortunate enough to go through the beta test of it and just see what you guys are doing, and I really support it. And it's something that came up to me as I started to get more involved in sort of the quote unquote plant medicine world. Is like, well, just what you're saying, like, it's great that someday you're going to be able to go to a clinic somewhere and get this therapeutic model, but that doesn't work for everybody. Not everybody is going to find that appealing and or have access to that. So what about these other settings? What about other people? And everything in that program is like you said, it's not reinventing the wheel, but it's like all the things that are good to know all in one place, rather than like I was saying in the beginning of the episode, like having to rely on the people around you that may or may not have been educated or have good information. Yeah, I'm really just a big fan of what you guys are doing with that, and I think that there's a huge need for it. Like you said, one of the things that really stuck out with that is like yes, we're going to need all these clinicians, but like all the clinicians do not have experience with psychedelics, and that's something that's really important. For somebody especially that's like going through a large experience, is like like we've been talking about, the community aspect of it, being understood. And I don't think that we can expect every clinician to to have that experience themselves, so that they like understand exactly what they're doing to people. And it's something that that my partner and I have been talking about amongst ourselves, of like, well, there's this danger of clinicians being able to prescribe things that they don't necessarily have the experience with. And so like having that that zip code support, as you called it, I think is super, super important as this continues to spread. To have more people that are educated, that understand what integration is, that understand the role of harm reduction and the importance of set and setting, and can also like help them learn skills to be supported and like increase their set, is just so important, I think, as it becomes more and more mainstream. So it's just an interesting place we're in.
Yeah, no, I agree. And we also just need a standardization. Like, just because set and setting doesn't mean like how to help de-escalate a situation, right? So just basic de-escalation skills, how to tactically use open-ended versus closed-ended questions depending on the situation. And these are all things that we touch upon in this program as well for the general layperson.
Yeah, and that importance of like, hey, this is accessible to everybody, you know, and you might not need it for you might not need a certificate, but it doesn't mean that it's not good information for you to have. And that's fantastic. And I'm already seeing it in different communities that I'm in, of like people asking these exact questions of like, hey, how do I get more involved? Because there is something about that as well. With psychedelics, it seems like a pretty common experience of like people have a pretty transformative approach or experience, and then they want to share that with others, or they want to figure out how they can be of service. And so like this is such a good place to start, not only because of the quality of the program, but because of the accessibility of it. Because I think a lot of people now, when they're in that place, are looking at all these different certificate programs, all these different things that are available, and with various price points, and the sort of inability to maybe see like how effective they are, or like what the authority on the sourcing is, and trying to make a decision about like, well, which one should I do? What's, I don't want to waste my money and things like that. And so, just going through the beta program myself, I saw a lot of doctors and a lot of people with like really good, solid experience contributing to that program. And, that I was like, okay, this is a really well thought out, it's definitely not half baked. You guys spent a lot of time and energy and effort putting together like a really solid program that is of value to everybody. So I appreciate for you that.
And I'd like to take the time now just to say, thank you to all the Psilohealth collaborators and team members. We have Scott Jensen. He's done an extraordinary amount of work here. Hannah Koch, David Sella, Justin Belko, Dr. Jahan, Manesh Kern, Isaiah, Amy. We have had an extraordinary amount of wonderful people help put this program together. And I'm deeply grateful for their contributions, their energy. It's hard to balance all the things in life, plus take on a whole educational program that we imagine will really kind of refresh the perspectives of some people in the psychedelic space. That's the goal, and to help create a solid infrastructure of sustainability and community-led healing initiatives. So that's the goal there. I just want to express the gratitude for them and the others that I may not have named. So I want to thank them so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
The time to.
And especially like just to see that this program now about to be released and flourishing, and that's got to be a good feeling. Yeah. So appreciative to all of them. Yeah. What's next for Psilohealth?
Yeah, so it's going to be launching this program here, 11 days from our conversation. After that, it's going to be looking like strategizing some future wellness approachments. We're going to be creating the community care clinician educational program as well. So that way we can help create trainings for clinicians, so that way they can work in tandem to the peer supporter. We're already in the process of putting together a database for geolocation purposes. So that way people can access this database for free and find their local registered peer supporter or local registered community care clinician. So it's really just going to be curating and creating different educational programs for clinicians, for peer supporters, and to also create the integration specialists, right? So the work that you do, that Sarai does, that David, Daniel, Bradford, Scott, being able to put together a curriculum to also create more integration specialists. Because as we have more people experiencing those days, we need more people to help support people with integration afterwards.
Right. Absolutely. Just creating a bigger infrastructure and a bigger network. The mycelial web is growing.
Exactly. Yes, sir.
It's a beautiful thing, man. and appreciate the work that you're doing. Well,
Thank you.
we'll make sure to put the link to the Psilocybin Peer Support on the show page as well. So definitely, if you're listening to this, you should check that out. It's has a lot of value, and even for somebody like myself, where like I felt like some of the things I knew or I was familiar with, not only was it like a good refresher of like, hey, like remember this is good to know. I felt like I learned something as well. Definitely, like especially like around the harm reduction and like safety aspect of it. So there's a lot of value there, regardless of kind of where you're at in your own work and your own journey. Unless you're working in isolation, which, as we've talked about, not necessarily the best thing. Community is so powerful. So it's definitely something you should check out. Man, this has been a great conversation. So good to catch up with you. And I don't know about you, like my wellness approachment experience has continued to kind of integrate and open up, and it's been something that kind of set the tone for the earlier on in the year, and it's just kind of continued to evolve, and it's been a really beautiful thing, and I appreciate being asked to be a part of it.
100%. Yeah, thank you for being a part of it.
Well, cool. So if people want to know more about Psilohealth, where should they go?
Yeah, go to the website. We're active on social. Subscribe to our newsletter. We'll be pumping out a monthly newsletter as well with some cool information, updates, and we're going to be we'll be active through those platforms. And then, of course, feel free to email me at any time if you have any specific questions, would like any support in navigating the ecosystem. I have some really awesome colleagues in the space that I can try and connect you to if it makes sense to do so. So, you just know that you're not in this alone, and that you can always reach out at any time. Yeah.
And another thing I wanted to mention is, just like Saad talked about how impactful those integration groups were to him. That's one of the things I appreciate about Psilohealth is that they're offering multiple integration circles online for free every month. That there's a resource there for you to connect to other people, to be seen and heard, and share your experience and experience that sense of community as well. So it's definitely something that would be good to take advantage of especially if you're new to the space and you're looking for that connection and community like Saad was talking about. Hope you guys enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. Hope to see you again on The Vital Point. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, I'd love it if you leave a review. Follow me on Instagram at Blue Magic Alchemy if you'd like to learn more about transformation, integration, and how to connect through coaching, breathwork, and meditation. Remember that regardless of the methods you're practicing, the vital point is to practice.